So the rigidly enforced segregation throughout the history of New Orleans is responsible for the black culture that evolved there. New Orleans was one of the largest slave markets that the American slaveholding culture produced. Many of the tribes uprooted from their native Africa were sold to plantation owners in the New Orleans area. Much of the African culture that they arrived in New Orleans with is still visible in the daily doings of their descendants. And here is something else for the self-appointed New Orleans experts to ponder. While most black communities in other cities throughout America, well, not New York, but a lot of cities, are mirror reflections of each other, every New Orleans black community is different, reflecting the different mannerisms and mores of the tribes who were stolen from Africa and sold in the New Orleans slave market. These differences are reflected in manners of speech, styles of dress, ways of cooking, and what is valued and treasured, family relationships, and other factors. As for instance, Wynton Marsalis and Aaron Neville are from uptown in the same general New Orleans area. Wynton's and Aaron's speech patterns are quite similar, whereas my speech patterns are unlike theirs and more like others from my downtown New Orleans neighborhood. Canal Street, incidentally, separates uptown New Orleans from downtown New Orleans. There are social and pleasure clubs throughout the New Orleans black communities. These are also known as benevolent or secret societies. This is a very African tradition. These societies were created for the overall good of the communities of which they are a part. In a segregated city, these societies have proven time and again to be a refuge against the chaos and unpredictability that permeates black life in a city where the dominant theme has always proven to be race. These societies sponsor events throughout the year. One function of many of these societies is the Mardi Gras Indian celebration.
Yes, indeed.
This is a cultural event that has been going on for the past 100 plus years in New Orleans. Black New Orleanians masquerade as American Indians in elaborate costumes that they make themselves. Neighborhoods compete against each other to see which Indians are the prettiest. Every Indian tribe is different from every other tribe in manner of dress, again reflecting the differences in the black New Orleans culture from neighborhood to neighborhood. In this regard, the Ninth Ward is a big part of the culture of black New Orleans. There are numerous social and pleasure clubs throughout both the upper and lower Ninth Wards. While some New Orleans communities have but one Mardi Gras Indian tribe, the Ninth Ward has many. How glorious it is to be a part of the pageantry in New Orleans on Mardi Gras Day when these many colorful and elaborately costumed tribes from all over the city meet and greet each other with tambourines ringing and their neighborhood entourages singing their praises. There's no more magnificent sight anywhere in New Orleans on Mardi Gras Day. Another yearly function of these social and pleasure clubs is their annual parade, or second line. Club members dress up in finery and hire bands and parade over a designated route, with locals joining in the revelry, which creates the second line, the first line being the band and social and pleasure club members. President Bush, in a speech in September from the New Orleans French Quarter, alluded to the second line. Typically, he didn't get it right. First of all, he said second line, when in fact it's second line. He put the emphasis on the first word, not the second word.
Say that.
All right. He said that the people in New Orleans have second lines for deceased musicians, but he didn't say that second lines were a regular part of the New Orleans culture, and that these social and pleasure clubs had them throughout the year, and that it didn't have to be because of a funeral. But the main thing he didn't say was that the New Orleans second line tradition is an African tradition. In fact, in listening to President Bush's entire speech, he didn't say black or use the term African American even one time. What's wrong with America's president? Didn't he see that most of the victims of Hurricane Katrina were black? He recently made a move to have an African burial ground that was discovered in Lower Manhattan in the 1990s turned into a national historical site, which is great, which is commendable. But is he more interested in dead African Americans than live ones? That's why he waited so long before assisting the predominantly black citizens of New Orleans. Was the plan to wait until we were dead and then to eulogize us? What's wrong with America's president? Maybe Kanye West said it best. Hurricane Katrina was a natural disaster that struck America. It struck America along the Gulf Coast, devastating New Orleans more than anywhere else. As the world knows now, the American government's response to our plight was a sin and a shame. They tried to make us responsible for what happened to us. They tried to deflect from the fact that many members of the Louisiana National Guard were in Iraq when they should have been in Louisiana. They tried to deflect from the fact that the federal government underfinanced the repair of the levees that allowed New Orleans to flood.
Go ahead.
They tried to tell the world that the reason they didn't respond to the victims of Katrina was because they were concerned for the safety of the responders because of the lawlessness of the people of New Orleans with the alleged looting and raping and rampaging that was occurring in wholesale numbers. Every reason given for their lack of response has since been discredited. When every attempt at making us, the victims, responsible for our own plight was discredited, the president owned up to his own failures and inadequacies. Note, though, that he tried everything else before owning up to his own failures.
Talk about it.
In September of 1958, George Washington Carver High School opened in the Upper Ninth Ward. Prior to this, there was no black high school in the Ninth Ward, the city's largest ward. Carver opened behind the Desire Housing Project back when living in a housing project was not a bad thing. Prior to that, Ninth Warders had to come up to the Sixth Ward to attend Joseph S. Clark High School. During the summer prior to the opening of Carver, when we received word that many of us would have to attend Carver instead of Clark, there was some apprehension in my area, the Seventh Ward. To use a solar system analogy, we saw the Seventh Ward as Earth and the Ninth Ward as Neptune or Pluto. We saw our communities as better, our schools as better, and certainly our resources as better. Many of us attended Valina C. Jones Elementary School, at that time perhaps the best elementary school for black children in the entire city. People like Eleanor Roosevelt and Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune and other dignitaries visited our school and were personal friends with our school's principal. There were many of us in the Seventh Ward of obvious mixed-race heritage and some felt that we would be treated with hostility by our mostly darker-skinned brethren in the Ninth Ward. After all, the school was on their turf.